Welcome to episode 329 of the DFO Rundown. I'm Jason Greger. As always, the rundown presented by Fountain Tire. They specialize in tire and auto service, and you don't have to settle for a good deal or good customer service because at Fountain Tire, they'll do both. If you need new tires or maybe your engine has a little rattle, stop in at Fountain Tire and they'll sort you out. Right now, you can save up to $225 on a set of 4 select tires, including Goodyear's, up until December 14th. Plus, save an additional $50 on any service over $150. Stop in at Fountain Tire or book online, fountaintire.com. As we welcome in Frank Saravalli, joining us from the Windy City in Chicago. Frankie, how you doing?
I'm good. Yeah. Good to be here. Gonna be here for the Blackhawks Canucks game on Tuesday, taping a pod with Connor Bedard, a Frankly Speaking episode on Monday. So time well spent in Chicago. It's interesting, you get these superstar players that enter the league and everyone lines up to talk to these guys. I'm like, everyone gets their crack in their rookie year. And it's like, I want to find out what he learned. So I'm curious to talk to him on Monday and chat about his first season in the NHL and how the second one's starting off.
You should see what it would cost him to eat a piece of candy. He doesn't eat candy, I hear.
Oh, really? I mean, I wish I could say the same. My kids did a little trunk or treat on Friday night, and it was just like 7 bags of candy in the house. Had to sneak a little fun size.
Oh, but what's trunk or treat? What's that?
So like it's with school, right? So instead of like, trick or treating, they do like it's like a safer way for kids to like get together at Halloween and trick or treat. Everyone like piles into the parking lot and parents open up their tailgate essentially and decorate it. And then you walk from car to car and you hang out with your buddies and run around, and the parking lot's closed off and everyone trick or treats and has a little fun.
But then they also go out on Halloween, right?
Yeah, they do. But you should see what parents do to decorate these cars.
Jeez. So basically the kids are getting 2 Halloweens now.
I mean, kind of, yeah.
Oh God, this is a fantastic deal for them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I love trick or treat, man. I love seeing all the kids dressed up and sit on the front porch, and it's a highlight now. My son's old enough; he doesn't need mom or dad to go with him anymore. So him and a few of the fellas in the neighborhood, all they do is they come back and dump out their load of they dump out the half a bag of candy and then wheel back the other side. So it's pretty sweet. They got a pretty good. Down where we're at, there's not a lot of there's tons of kids, so there's not a lot of people out there driving around, so it's super safe and kids are wheeling all over the place. And I think they've learned the most efficient way so you can bag the most amount of candy in the shortest period of time. So
tell me though, late October, Halloween in Edmonton, what's the temperature? Like, do you have to gear up?
It varies. Some years, like I do remember, like there's times where, I put a snowsuit on under or over an outfit. Oh, there's the odd time, but I would say the vast majority of it, you're, because you're a kid and you're running. So like, some of the parents who feel they have to go out with their kids all the time, they're probably a little bit colder, but I would say on average, usually it's probably like, anywhere from 8 to 15 degrees. So I don't know what that is Fahrenheit, but I know that'd probably be like 45 to 55, somewhere around there.
Yeah. I mean, we could easily catch a 20 degree day and it'd be great. I mean, we've had some in the, mid 40s, kind of similar to that, but I'll tell you what, it's been really nice the last few weeks and warm, but we had a couple nights already dip into the 30s, so just above freezing. I know you've had that as well, but we had a frost delay at the golf course on Saturday morning.
Oh, geez. Actually, I think they in Edmonton, lots of the courses, most of them, this was their Sunday was their last day for quite. So October 20th, that's pretty good. I think there's the odd one who's still open, but the majority of them have they kind of shut down this past weekend, which is a pretty good run in for Edmonton.
Yeah, I mean, for us, you can. I mean, as long as there's no snow, you can play all year. So
wow,
we have guys that'll play and
the fairway's just
like,
kind of brown.
Yeah, it's not even so much brown; it just gets like crispy.
Oh yeah. Wow. So your drive's a little bit. All of a sudden, you're like, "Hey, I can. I'm a 270, but now I'm a 285 off the tee."
Well, it's actually where you really notice the biggest differences in the greens. Like it's for whatever reason in the winter, I feel like you just putt so much better. So it feels like your scores get a little
But
inflated.
do they stick? Can you attack the greens when it's that? Or are they harder and it runs off?
No, they're hard. Definitely harder, but the grass is longer, so it doesn't move as much.
All right. So today in the pod, we'll talk about what's going on in the league in a bit, but Frank and I, we're going to have a little fun debate, which I think is, I'll be curious what the audience and the listeners think. So feel free to chime in at Frank Saravalli, at Jason Gregor on Twitter. But we were looking at the 2020 NHL entry draft, and it's turned out to be a pretty good draft. If you look at that class, obviously Alex Lafreniere went first, and he's had a little bit slower of a start. I think last year's kind of a little bit more of a breakout year for him. Stutzle's being the most offensively gifted player out of that draft with 254 points. There's Lucas Raymond, Seth Jarvis, Anton Lundell, Stanley Cup winner, Quentin Byfield. You got John Paterka, JJ Paterka, whose coach loves him. He's really coming on now in Buffalo. Then you got some guys, Sanderson and Brock Faber, of course, on the back end, goalie, and many others. So we were looking at that class, Frank. And so for fun, excluding goalies, but if you had to pick your starting five, who would you put right now of 2020 draft picks?
Well, so one thing I want to clarify, is it players as they are right now, or are we still betting on the future and what they could be?
100% on what you think, because I love, it's still only 4 years since they've been drafted, right? Like a lot of people say you can't tell 7 years realistically. So it's from what you've seen plus what you think some guys are going to grow into over the next few years. So kind of a little bit, if you were drafting today, from what you've seen, who would be your starting three and your two D-men who you think, next year, the following year are going to be the best?
Okay, so I think the best way to do this is agnostically, meaning position agnostic. We're like not worrying about center, right, or left. Like I want the best collection of 3 forwards and the best 2 defensemen, regardless of which way they shoot. So if that's the ground rule, I mean, I'll start with defense. It's really hard to move away from Jake Sanderson. So I think I would go Jake Sanderson and Brock Faber as my 2 defensemen.
Yes, I would agree wholeheartedly.
And then my 3 forwards. This is where it gets interesting. I think I would go something like Quentin Byfield, Tim Stutzle, and the third one's really a toss-up for me because I might go Seth Jarvis, but Lucas Raymond is really good.
So no Alexis Lafreniere?
Probably not right now. I know that he's played more games than everyone else, so we've had more to look at, and obviously it's taken him a little bit of time to really get going, and he's on track this year already for a pretty special season. He's north of a point per game, and he still is kind of just scratching the surface, it feels like. But I think Seth Jarvis, at least right now for me, It's either Jarvis or Raymond.
Okay. Well, pick one. You only get one.
I'm going to go Seth Jarvis.
Seth Jarvis. Okay. I would agree on the defense. I've got Faber and Sanderson. Man, I think Jake Sanderson he's both those guys have Norris potential, but I think Jake Sanderson might have higher Norris potential. Honestly, I just think he's a very special player, elite skater. His mobility is fantastic. Just his vision and how he sees the ice is really impressive to me. I like him a lot. Faber obviously had a great rookie season. I think he's going to be very good, but I think if I had to pick even those two, I would rank Sanderson number one. I think he has the higher ceiling between the two of them. Up front it's a great debate for lots of different guys. I would Stutzle's there, very gifted offensive player, no question. But I have Alexis Lafreniere. I know that he started slow. I wouldn't have put him in there as early as he was, but he was, and there's nothing you can do about it. But last year in the playoffs, I thought he took over. The thing about him is he still doesn't get, the number one power play unit all the time. And so that's going to be a bit, I think, wait till he gets there. I think that's when he's going to really flourish. So I'm kind of betting on that a little bit. And then the other one's hard because, man, you watch Buffalo. I really like Peterka. I think that guy is coming on, but the one player who is on a deep team, but Anton Lundell does everything well. And I love Byfield. And so I'm torn between Byfield and Lundell. And I think I'm going to take Lundell long-term because of, his hockey sense to me is elite, and he's a great two-way player already. I think he's got good offensive potential. Like, I love Byfield's size, but I'm going to go with Anton Lundell.
He doesn't have offensive potential, really. 44, 30, 38, 35 points. Like, Byfield's already gotten to 55. Lundell's a great two-way player, but he doesn't have any there's no high ceiling offensively for him to get to.
Well, see, I think he's been playing. You got to remember, he hasn't got a chance to play really regularly in their top six yet. And that's what I'm banking on. Like, he's off to a good start this year. I watched him lots in the playoffs the last few years. I love his overall game. And I think Lundell is going to be, he's going to be a 75 to 80 point player here in the next few years.
Wow. I think that's one of the boldest things you've ever said on this podcast. And I'm not kidding. Like, Tyler, we've been telling him to write it down and talk about it, but I don't see it.
All right. I like Lundell a lot, man.
So who are your three? So it's Lundell,
Lafreniere, and Stutzle.
Okay.
But you know what? It's great because, like, Seth Jarvis, a hell of a player. And and I was really bullish on Byfield just because, like, when you're that big and you can skate as well as him, I'm just like, oof. Like, I kind of am like, God, why am I not picking him? But I'm kind of bullish on Lundell. So I wanted to go a little bit off the board, but I think Lundell, and when I look historically at European players, lots of those guys until 22, like, that's when they start to really emerge. And I think that's what we're going to see from him. Historically, it's a big adjustment for some of those guys. And I think the next few years for Lundell, he's obviously got more room to grow. It's a valid point by you, right? Like, he's got more room offensively to gain than the other guys. So maybe playing catch up is a better way to put it. But, man, I like him a lot. And I think when he gets more ice time, which eventually he will in the top six in Florida, I think you're going to see his numbers reflected.
So I really thought long and hard actually about Connor Zary.
Really?
Yes. I think Connor Zary gets 70 points this season.
This season? Wow.
Yep.
Whew.
He's at 5 points in 5 games to start. I had him as a breakout star before the season started. I projected him, I think, somewhere between 65 and 70. So I think he's going to be real close. And, like, he's a guy I thought long and hard about. But where this gets really interesting, like, we could probably come up with 2 really good lines, right? Like, unbelievable blend of
Like,
right now and the future.
yeah.
But if I put a gun to your head and I said you have to pick a third defenseman,
That's a good question because there's a few I like.
so I'll run through the options for you: Jamie Drysdale, Caden
Yeah.
Gooley, Braden Schneider, Shakir Mukhamadullin.
Well, there's Damon Hunt from Damon Hunt's going to be, I think, a really good player too, but probably a ways away.
He's not in that category.
No. Yeah, I don't know if there's another. Like, I don't know if Justin Bear.
And what about Mason Lowry? That's a great one. I might actually take him third.
You would take him?
I'm thinking about. I mean, so I think probably right now I'm leaning toward. I'm probably leaning toward Caden Gooley.
Yeah, well, I'm torn because I like Schneider a lot, but Jamie Drysdale, I think he was banged up last year. I watched him in Edmonton. His mobility, man, really stood out to me. And I know he's got to learn to be a better defensive defenseman. I understand that, but I think Drysdale might have the higher ceiling of those guys.
No, I think he does, but I think that's the easy pick. He was the 6th overall pick, and everyone can see what he did right when he entered the league. Like, he kind of instantly became a 30-some point defenseman. My thing is, I guess I'm kind of looking toward a really complete game, and he could have that, but I think Caden Gooley's on track. And I mean,
Braden Schneider's a hell of a D-man too, man.
Actually,
more I think about it, I'm like, he's on a pretty deep Ranger blue line. And when those guys, they kind of move out, I won't be surprised if we see him play even more. So I might actually go with Braden Schneider now that I say it.
I mean, they're all really good picks. And now let me throw this at you. Who would you pick for a goalie?
Oh God. There's Levi. I'm trying to think. Who are the Devin Levi? Oh yeah.
There's Drew Comesso.
What's the guy that he came in early.
There's Callie Klang.
The guy in New Jersey, Nico Dawes. Nico, right?
Yep.
But I haven't seen much of him lately. I'd probably, if I had to, you know who I might go with? Joel Blomqvist.
That's another great one. I think right now I'm probably today's Sunday. Askarov had another shutout this weekend in the AHL.
In the American League, yeah.
He's played 2 games, 120 minutes, 2 shutouts. He stopped all 48 shots that he's faced. We're probably absolute idiots if we don't take him, but
could be right.
I really like Devin Levi and how this season it looks, at least to start, like he's taking another step.
Yeah, the challenge for Askarov is going to be Frank. He's going to go into San Jose for the first years, and he is going to get tested because they are not much better than they were last year.
Yeah, and don't sleep on Joel Blomqvist, and that's probably a really good transition to the Pittsburgh Penguins and their goalie situation with Mike Sullivan making Tristan Jarry a healthy scratch on Sunday.
Yeah, what'd you make of that? Like, not starting him's one thing, not even dressing him. Like, that is, that's obviously it's super rare because mostly teams don't have, it's not like a lot of teams are carrying 3 goaltenders, but what do you make of that decision? Is like, there's one thing to be said about, okay, we're going to start, we got Nedeljkovic and he started, but now maybe they just felt like we're not going to dress him because what's the point of dressing him as a backup? We'll put Blomqvist to get dressed. And so it's a complete day off for him, right? So he's not preparing because everybody always tells you, right? Well, even if I'm the backup, I prepare like I'm going to start. So maybe that's the thought process. I don't know, but it is unique. We don't see it very often.
Yeah. So I'd say there's two things going on. I think just reading between the lines, I think Mike Sullivan is exasperated. It
Okay.
took him 4 days into this season basically for him to declare that Tristan Jarry hasn't been good enough. I mean, when he made the decision to start Blomqvist a second straight time, again, I think this is the third game of the season. He said, "We're going with the guy who gives us the best chance to win."
Yeah.
That's a pretty big indictment for a goalie that's in the second year of a 5-year deal. And hey, it's October. The Oilers ran into that last year in the exact same scenario with
Yeah.
Jack Campbell. And that was the beginning of the end for Campbell. And
Yeah, it's true.
this time around, I think it just feels, I have nothing to go on. This is pure instinct and having seen this before, that the head coach is unhappy and either doesn't trust him or needs to see more. And then on the flip side of that, I think there's a lot to what you said about how you approach this from a pure mental perspective. This is, if you're actually gonna take a step back and try and reset, the best way to do that is to not be in uniform. Now,
Yeah.
some might argue that the idea of adding attention, eyeballs, and now increased pressure to a pretty high profile healthy scratch might not be the way to do it. I mean, the Leafs did it last year with Ilya Samsonov, and he went to the AHL.
Yeah. And he responded when he came back and played pretty well.
And now he's in Vegas and he looks good.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I just think I'm reading more on the coach than I am on anything else.
Now, what do you make, Frank? We had heard some rumblings last year that, maybe the coach and GM weren't directly on the same page all the time. Is this another example? Or do you think that was overblown?
I never heard that. I think that was
Yeah.
probably overblown, and not saying that it's not possible, but everyone has seemingly been waiting for some sort of moment to point to say, hey, this is the opening for the Pittsburgh Penguins to move on from Mike Sullivan. And I don't think for 1 second that that's how the hierarchy of that organization thinks. I'm not talking about Kyle Dubas. I have no idea what he thinks. I'm talking purely about Fenway Sports Group.
Right.
Mike Sullivan is, or at least was, as thick as thieves with the ownership group of the Penguins. He's a Boston guy who has been known to visit with them in the summer, take in Red Sox games, got his extension basically directly from Fenway. That made him one of the highest paid coaches in the league. I think the second or third highest paid. And he got it really by going around, not him personally, but Fenway Sports Group did it essentially going around Ron Hextall.
Yeah.
To me, that tells me that a coach, at least in this league, is as close to as bulletproof as possible. Now, is it possible that at some point things go sideways and Kyle Dubas wants to play a card and make a coaching change? Possibly. But I think everyone can kind of see right through whatever's happening with the Penguins, because if they do go sideways, it has to come down to roster construction, not Mike Sullivan just suddenly not being a good coach anymore.
Yes, 100%. Yeah, I think if he got let go, he would be hired as quick as he chose to be hired. You know what I mean? Like, maybe he'd want to take a break. Some guys say they need to recharge, but I think there'd be offers for him to get back behind a bench sooner than later, for sure. It's just an interesting one when I look at that organization, and You mentioned not even second year. Like, my goodness, what are you talking? 3 games into that deal? And it's now goaltending is weird. We've seen guys that struggle and they go to the minors or they're out for 3 weeks and they're working with their goalie coach and they come back and they're fine. Like I still think Tristan Jarry has legit NHL talent. I don't discount that, but for whatever reason right now, it ain't working for him. So, you got to grind through it, but it's something to watch. And, the 3 goalies, Frank, it's all of a sudden, it's kind of surprising how many teams are going with 3 goalies right now. Like, there seems to be a lot that are worried about putting somebody on waivers because they don't want to lose them. And I understand that, but it does seem to be becoming more popular that they're going to have 3 goaltenders on a roster right now. And I wonder if
I think
like I've heard
needs to change the rule. Like I
well, I've
think, look, there's enough GMs that I think have an appetite to do it. The tough part is, how do you figure out how to count it on the cap?
And do you think the goalies and the Players Association wants it?
Well, in theory, they should, because it's more NHL pay, right?
Right.
So most of these guys, even the ones that end up going on waivers,
but they're on 1-year deal. They're on one-way contracts anyway, aren't they?
Most of the time, yes. But there
Yeah.
are certainly still some younger guys that are on 2-way deals that end up hanging with the team for a long time, and that's just more pay in their pocket. I've been advocating forever that teams need to formalize and professionalize a 3rd goalie system, just purely to get away from the embarrassment that is the e-bug. I say this all the time. We don't, like, I'm watching over my shoulder here the NLCS, and the Mets are about to get romped, hopefully. And the Dodgers advanced to the World Series. But could you imagine, like, plucking, I know we don't do this in the playoffs, but plucking someone out of the stands to become a reliever for a game in baseball?
Yeah.
Could you imagine pulling someone out of the stands to kick a field goal in a football game? Like, I've seen the movie Garbage Picking Field Goal Kicking Philadelphia Phenomenon. That was a Disney movie back in the day. But it doesn't make any sense to me. I don't know why we view that as an acceptable alternative in 2024 in the NHL.
Yeah. Well, it's a valid point. It's hard to argue when now some might say it doesn't happen very often, so whatever. But I know that they kind of now have more of a designated goalie in each market of guys, college hockey players and university guys now. So they've taken a little bit more advanced than where they used to be. So I guess that aspect's good. But I know you talk to lots that say if you had a 3rd goalie in practice, you could limit your starter and then he might actually play more games because he's not taking as much rubber in practice. I've seen that floated around and I've talked to goalies about it. Like I know a lot of goalies, they change their glove, Frank, every 3 to 4 weeks because the amount of shots they take, the padding in the pocket of their glove, right, starts to break down and then you start to feel it more after 3 to 4 weeks. I was like, holy geez.
Huh. Yeah, I'd be all for a change, but I do think for the time being, the way things are structured, it's not really ideal for whoever ends up getting the short end of the stick as the 3rd guy, which is why I think if you were allowed, even if you didn't allow 3 goalies, but you allowed the 3rd goalie in your organization that you could tag to potentially be waiver exempt. Hey, you stick your neck out and sign this guy in July. Some of these guys get signed on July 1st because teams want to have a valid insurance piece in their organization. So you do the legwork, you convince the guy to sign, you pay him. And then what? October rolls around and you got to throw this guy on waivers just because that's how NHL roster rules work and you lose him? That also doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. I think you should get some sort of it's not benefit of the doubt, but you should get some leeway by targeting and identifying a quality 3rd goalie.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see how it plays out. Obviously, it probably wouldn't be something that would change until the next CBA. And you know how the CBA works, or well, if you guys want this, you got to give us something back, yada, yada, yada. They're all about the give and take in those negotiations. And I wonder how much of an appetite, because some GMs might say, hey, you know what? Maybe we can load up on ours and then we can pluck other people's as they develop them. Because if there's one position, Frank, that does get developed by organizations and then play elsewhere, I don't know if like the goaltending position seems more like that than any other position in hockey, and historically has, right? Guy will play 3 years, teams like, man, we don't think this guy's any good. Other team signs him to be their back, to be their third goalie in the American League the next year. And within a year or two, now suddenly he's on their NHL roster, right? All the time, right?
Yeah,
like
Tyler
I
just
thought
mentioned in the chat that Sam Montembeault was on waivers at one point. Anthony Stolarz is now starting at least until Joe Wall gets healthy for the Toronto Maple Leafs. Like, I mean, I've been watching Anthony Stolarz for 10 years now.
Oh, yeah. Oh, well, because goalies after like they get that one extra year that skaters don't, right? So that's kind of built in. You get one extra year of development for goalies. But the thing is, most goalies, if we look at it historically, they're not ready till they're 25. So a lot of them they're waiver eligible then anyway. And sometimes they've been through waivers twice already. And then all of a sudden they pop. Like it, like go back to Binnington, the year he won the cup, man. He was like their fifth goalie in St. Louis, and all of a sudden becomes their starter. Like it's a weird position that's, I don't even know if you put in a different rule, if it ultimately changed much. I think we'd still see a lot of late developers, ones that people overlook. And I don't know why it happens, because I've talked to a lot of people in the goalie union, and some of them don't really have a concrete answer as to why it's such a volatile position.
I still think we need some kind of change.
Yeah, it might happen. Bring it up. Ask Bedard when you talk to him tomorrow. See what he thinks. No, not kidding.
Yeah, I'm sure he's going to have tons of opinions on the goalie situation.
On goal.
I'm just
you could ask about where to shoot.
I'm just asking for any opinion at all. Something. Give me something. So
now, speaking of goalies,
he's a pretty guarded guy.
Yeah. Speaking of goalies, the Winnipeg Jets, Connor Hellebuyck started their first 4 games, won them all. Eric Comrie started against the Penguins. He wins. They're 5-0. When you look at Hellebuck's workload, do you see Winnipeg, like Eric Comrie's got to start at least 25 to 28 games this year? Don't you think that's the best thing for the Jets?
Well, I want to understand the root of why you're asking the question. Are you suggesting that you think Hellebuyck struggled in the first round last year because he played too much?
Well, it's not just, it's 2 years in a row. And I'm just wondering, when you look at wear and tear on goalies, does it matter for them? I know it's not all his fault, because Colorado just turnstiled the Jets skaters, time and time again. And I do know that teams, when every goalie has a weakness, even the best goalies in the league. And I found that the advanced scouting Colorado did, they seem to exploit him. So maybe the games played won't matter as much, but I just wonder if the Jets, if that's something they consider at all to lessen his workload a little bit.
Well, I think they have. I mean, just look at the last 3 years. He's gone 66, 64, 60. And correlation we can determine later, but save percentage has gone up 910, 920, 921. I mean, granted, he had his best season ever, 924 save percentage, in a year that he had 67 games played. And that's also the year that they went deep and went to the conference final and lost to Vegas. So you could probably cook the numbers any which way you want. I still think the consensus is, at least in talking to teams, head coaches, managers, has been the magic number is 55 games.
Yeah, well, exactly.
You don't really want to exceed it by that much, but there's also some special circumstances and situations. You mentioned, we just had a discussion about 3 goalies. I mean, most teams go through at least 4 in a season that end up playing a game, because if it's not the starter that's hurt, sometimes at varying points, the backup gets hurt and you got to bring someone else in. So, it's really rare to see teams get through an entire 82 game season anymore with just 2 goalies being used.
Yeah. Oh, and hey, Hellebuck is ultra durable. The last 3 years, he's played the second most games at 190. Saros is at 194. Vasilevsky, even with his injuries, third at 175. And so I wonder with Hellebuck, like, do you need him to start 60 games? Or like, even I know some people say, it's only 2 fewer games, 3 or 3, but you know, if you believe in the cumulative effect, and that would be 4 years in a row, and not everybody else is doing it. Why would you? If your team defense and you believe in your team defense that well, and here's the other thing, Frank, the Jets, they have the fewest back-to-back games in the NHL. They only play back-to-back 6 times. So that's 6 starts that we assume that, you know, the backup's going to make, because very few teams do it. Every now and then a guy will go back-to-back, but doesn't happen very often. So I look at that and say, you know what? They're going to have a lot of playing every second day kind of thing. Why not have a little bit more of a plan? Talk to them, of course, and just say, hey, man.
You're assuming, by the way, that they don't have a plan. Like, I'm sure they do have a plan.
But all I'm saying is it's
so much
3 years.
It's not so much trust in the defense, it's trust in the backup.
Yeah, but last year their backup had really good numbers.
Right. And so now you look at it and it, like, I think for sure Comrie should be playing more than 22 games.
Yeah. So that's what I said. 25 to 20, like 28 game, 27 starts, then it's 55. So maybe he's up to 57. Like, to me, 25 starts should be a for sure number for Comrie. And if Hellebuck's at 57, I'm fine with that. The Jets are still great defensively. Like, they haven't missed a beat. They picked up right where they left off in the regular season. Early on this year. Like, I don't know if you've watched any of their games, Frank, but my God, it's like Hellebuck's getting tested a bit, but it's their defense right now in Winnipeg as a team defense is really impressive.
Well, that was the other thing, by the way, that made this Winnipeg tandem so interesting is they signed Capo Kakinen to a 1-year, $1 million deal on July 1st. This was supposed to be a competition. Comrie ended up winning the job. Kakinen gets claimed off waivers by Colorado, and he was stuck in immigration hell for at least a week as a Finnish national coming over from Canada to a US team. It always takes a little bit longer. And now the curious thing is, what kind of workload will the Avs give him, and how long will it take him to get up to speed, since he was kind of, in limbo for a bit. I was wrong on the Jets. I think I underestimated, and I said this on Daily Faceoff Live on Friday with Tyler. I underestimated the power of the Jets' identity. I think that defensive style that they play, the depth that they have, and they can grind you and wear you down. Like, that third line might be the best third line in the league with Adam Lowry. And that, like, if you were thinking, hey, what does this defense core look like? How strong is it? Point to me and show me where you think the studs are. I think that they're a team that is best defined as the sum being greater than the parts.
Yeah. Yeah, I do like their third line a lot. And hey, Kyle Connor, guy can play on my team any day. Pretty much just almost a guarantee. Well, he guarantees going to get you 30, probably 40. I like the Jets team a lot. I think they'll be a team that wants to upgrade their blue line, I think, come trade deadline time, Frank. But to me, that's the thing I'm watching most is just, when and where they use Hellebuck, and do they have faith in Eric Comrie?
25 games.
I have no problem with that. That's what it should be. Another team that you would think would get going, Frank, but the Edmonton Oilers' big guns are shooting blanks. They've scored 4 goals in their 4 losses. And the one they scored against Dallas is kind of garbage time. It was late in the game. It's 3-0. They score with 3 minutes left, and it's 3-1. Their power play has 1 goal. They've been the best power play in the league for 5 years. They've been the number 1 shot volume team and shots per 60 on the power play. They're not shooting at all. I don't know if you watch their power play, but it doesn't look in sync at all. Zach Hyman doesn't have a point in 6 games. It's funny in Edmonton, people keep talking about, well, goaltending, defense, whatever. And it's like, dude, look at, like, they dominated Dallas for 40 minutes and couldn't score. Chicago, they should have been up 3-0 in the first period, couldn't score. I'd argue just as staunchly that their lack of offense is, and surprisingly, is just as much of an issue right now early on. Now, I assume it would get better, but it's got to wake up sooner than later.
Well, I think it's fair to say it's the issue early on, which is why this isn't a cop-out when I say it. I feel like I'm done talking about the Edmonton Oilers for a little while.
You think they'll be fine?
Yeah, look, they dominated 40 minutes against the Dallas Stars, and had they won that game, would have gotten through the week 3-3. And we probably are like, okay, Edmonton's on track, and I still think they're on track. To me, the big litmus test was not the Dallas game, even though some viewed it as a measuring stick based on where Dallas is in the conference and the start that they got off to. The litmus test to me was Nashville. You faced a really hungry Preds team trying to get on the board, your first road game of the season. You didn't really look great against the Flyers earlier in the week, and you found a way to exhale and then head on the road. And, that was it was definitely their best game of the season. So to me, I look at it and go, this team, is Zach Hyman, is he going to go another 6 games with 0 points? Are the Oilers forwards, is their power play are they going to continue to struggle the way they have? No, these things all sort themselves out over time. And I know that, if you're Nashville and you're saying that about them right now, that's not a security blanket. That's not making you feel good, knowing that no team in the salary cap era has ever gone 0-5, no points to start a year, and still ended up making the playoffs. But for Edmonton, the story's different. The talent's different. The history is different. I still, they're not really registering on my concern level meter, and it's going to take a lot for that to change.
What about the Preds? 0-5.
Yeah, I think just surprised more than anything. I feel like they probably feel like they got hit in the face with a 2x4 to start the year. I mean, this is a team that not just spent a ton, but I felt like with the guys that they brought in also really upgraded their everything about their organization, the view of it around the league, their dressing room. Like they went above and beyond to become a much better team this summer, and they just haven't gotten any results. And I mentioned the history and I mentioned what that means. I think the last team to go 0-5 to start a year and make the playoffs was back in 1995, I think, or 96. So it's been a really long time, and I'm not concerned because they can dig their way out of this and they're really talented. But when you get to this point and you start to wear it, like watching their body language, they seem to be wearing it. I just have concerns that it continues to snowball even worse.
Yeah, I'm surprised. Obviously, now they could still be a playoff team, no question. But it is their organization said they thought it would be a slow transition. It would take some time to get together, and obviously, it's probably lasted longer than they would like. They just lost to a Detroit team that was kind of reeling a little bit, Frank. And so it's kind of curious when you look at the Preds and even their upcoming schedule. It's not necessarily easy at all. So, you get too deep in the muck And I know because it's fresh, everybody always talks about, wow, look what Edmonton did last year. I'm like, yeah, they had to win 16 in a row and 8 in a row to get back on track, right? Like it's not, if you dig too deep of a hole early, it's really hard. And so Nashville, I think there's a little bit of pressure here to get going like sooner than later. You don't want this all of a sudden it's 0-8, man. That might be too much of a hole.
I also just feel like last year the Preds, I don't want to say people forgot, but they had a very similar win streak that the Oilers did that totally changed the complexion of their season. I mean, they were dead in the water for a long time and looked like they were continuing on with their rebuild path before they just made an absolute sharp right turn toward the playoffs.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll see. Let's bring in Tyler Yaremchuk to the pod. Ty, how you doing?
I'm doing good, boys. I'm ready to go here with a new edition of Buy or Sell. It is brought to you by our friends at Bet365, the largest sports betting platform globally. You can download the app today, use the promo code DAILY365 to get in on a huge range of markets, whether you're betting maybe on the upcoming finals in Major League Baseball, football. My Bills won this weekend as well. Go Bills. Tons to get to Bet365. You can get in on it all with that promo code DAILY365. I got a couple for you guys here in Buy or Sell. I want to start with a interesting debate that was thrown out on Daily Face-Off by our colleague Hunter Crowther, who wrote, "It's time to say it. Anze Kopitar is better than Patrice Bergeron." So buy or sell on that take. Kopitar, career-wise, and granted, Kopitar is still going, so there is that benefit. Career-wise, you buying that Kopitar is better than Bergeron, Frank?
Man, that is a great question, because you think about Bergeron and the first thing that comes to mind is the Selke, and you think about how just gifted of a player he was and so complete. But then you look at and it's not Bergeron, and maybe there is some East Coast bias there. But Kopitar has 2 Selkes himself. And no one would say that he's not a complete player. Then you look at the point production, and it's just at another level that Patrice Bergeron never got to. I would lean toward, as much as Patrice Bergeron is, maybe one of the most perfect players ever to come through the NHL in a lot of different ways. I would say I would buy and say, yes, Anze Kopitar, better player than Patrice Bergeron.
Greg's.
Oh, well, I think Kopitar has 9 seasons of 70 points. And I think Bergeron has 1. Kopitar had a 90-point season, multiple 80-point seasons. He's won multiple cups. So, you can't have that argument. I still, some people don't like to hear it. There is still, North American players get hyped up more than European players in North America because the majority of the people are from here. I get it. It's not a bad thing. I'm probably guilty of it myself at times, but and playing in LA, their games don't start till 8:30 a lot of time. That's 8:30 Mountain Time, 10:30 Pacific. So let's be real. It's closer to 10:45. How many people are even watching their games very often? No, Anze, I like Patrice Bergeron is a hell of a player. Don't get me wrong. But Anze Kopitar, big, strong, skates, more productive offensive player, just as good defensively. It's going to end up with over, 200 plus more points than him. I think it's Kopitar, and I don't think it's close, actually. I think Kopitar is clearly a better player.
It is interesting now that you say, again, bring up where he played. Like, if Kopitar was a Ranger, how do we view Anze Kopitar in the grand scheme of things? And I guess, maybe if he doesn't go to LA, he doesn't have the cup. So does that also change it? Like, it is a really interesting debate. You can read about it over on dailyfaceoff.com. Next one I got for you guys. This one came to me a bit, Frank. We were talking, it was last week or a couple weeks ago, when Carter Verhaeghe signed his deal, $7 million AAV. And you kind of look through that Panthers roster, and it's, they're getting to the point that a lot of cup winners do, where a lot of the pieces that helped you win that were value are now no longer value, right? Verhaeghe's going to be 7. Reinhardt's making 8.6. Even a guy lower down the lineup like Evan Rodriguez is now making $3 million. And this all brings me to Sam Bennett, who is a pending UFA. Do you think the Panthers will A, have the ability to get this done, and B, with their cap constraints, can they get this done? Your buy or sell question is, are you buying or selling on Sam Bennett being a member of the Florida Panthers at this time next year, Greggs?
Really good question. What'll he be? 29, I think, next year. So not old by any stretch of imagination by today's player. He was making $300K more than Verhaeghe, and Verhaeghe just got the raise up to $7 million. Now, Verhaeghe's put up bigger numbers historically. So let's say he wants 6.5 for argument's sake. Can they afford it? Probably. Because Bobrovsky's only got Bobrovsky's got 1 year left after this on his deal, right? So that's 10 mil that's going to be freed up there. And then who knows what they're going to do with Spencer Knight here. So, they got 14 million in goaltending. It's crazy, but I would be surprised if they didn't sign Bennett. I'm curious about the term, and does he automatically get, 7 years minimum from them? I think that would be the more interesting one. He's a rugged physical player, and sometimes those guys wear down a little bit more, 33, 34, 35. So, but I think Sam Bennett's a really important player to that team. He's a very unique type of player, a mix of skill and grit and toughness that I think they really love. And I think Bill Zito really respects that. And you can see it by the teams that he builds. So I would be way more surprised if he left than if he signed.
I was just going to use almost those same exact words and say I would be shocked if he's not re-signed. I mean, look, the cap's going up 4.5 at a minimum.
Yeah.
And then the year after that is going to be another 5 at the minimum. There's plenty of room to keep him. There's plenty of room in the Florida cap ecosystem to find an extra $2.5 to $3 million in a raise if he wants to get it, which I'm sure he does and deserves it. To me, the biggest wild card on the Florida Panthers is not will Sam Bennett be back? It's really will Aaron Ekblad be back? That, I think, is the way more interesting question, because Ekblad is going to be probably, he's definitely getting some kind of raise. What's it going to cost, and are they willing to do it?
Is he going to get it? Who would you rather have, Ekblad or Forsling, from what you saw? I mean, maybe the Stanley Cup Finals clouds the way I view those two guys now, but could that be something where the Panthers are like, whoa, we like Forsling more. We're only paying him 5.75.
Oh, I think that's part of it. And Forsling's production has also been better.
Yeah. That is interesting. All right. Final one I got for you guys. I plugged this last week, but one of the things I really like about Bet365 is that throughout the season, they're constantly updating their over-unders for points in the regular season for teams. It's almost like watching like a kind of stock market thing. As teams go on heaters, you can see where their numbers go. But two teams that are dead even right now, 99.5 for their over-unders, are Vegas and Vancouver. Buy on one to hit 100 points this year. Who do you think is the more sure thing, if you want to call it that, Frank?
Vegas. And I say that knowing that the Canucks won the division last year, and they have as many points through 6 games as they did last year. They had as many points through 4 games. Did they play 6? I think they played 6. But they're right on track points wise. If you go back to last season of where they were, they had 6 points through 5 games. So the odd part about, it's not even odd, but a lot of what Vancouver has experienced to start this season has been similar to what a few other teams have, which is they haven't gotten big time production from their stars. The leading scorer on the Canucks has 5 points in 5 games. At this time last year, the leading scorer on the Canucks had 10 points in 5 games. So you might look at that and say, well, then that probably bodes well that they have the same number of points through 5 games as they did last year and went on to win the division at 109 points. I just think Vegas is the better team. I think they are definitely the better defensive team. And I think depending on how long it takes the Oilers to get in gear, Vegas should be the favorite in the Pacific Division.
Greg's Vegas v Vancouver. Who do you like more?
Well, my concern about Vegas is, can they stay healthy? That has been their biggest issue. Some of their key guys are getting hurt, and whether you want to call injury prone or just the wear and tear of the NHL, that to me has been the issue in Vegas for a little bit. Vegas had an unreal start last year. Then we all saw what happened. Now, last year. I don't think Vancouver's going to have the shooting percentage that they had last year. I think Vancouver, the longer Vancouver kind of hangs around and is just, doing okay, like through the first 10 games, right? To me, the wild card in this is Demko. When is Demko coming back? We haven't heard much recently on him. If Demko comes back and learns how to, that injury that he has is very rare and no one really knows what's going to happen. So it's a huge wild card. But if he can play, then I would pick Vancouver. But I don't think he is. So I got to pick Vegas.
There you go, boys. That is a wrap on this week's edition of Buy or Sell, brought to you by Bet365.
Yeah, like that's the big unknown in Vancouver is Demko, man. Like now I think Lankinen and Sheloff as a tandem can be just fine. Right. But I wonder, the longer it goes, Frank, like I know that Vancouver tries to keep everything super tight to the vest anyway, but it's like, does it not seem a little odd? Like it's kind of almost gone more quiet on Demko.
Doesn't seem odd to me. The ball's in his court. They're not going to push him. They're not even anywhere close to go time. Lankinen's been excellent. Yeah. They're waiting for Thatcher Demko to tell them that he's comfortable. And whenever that happens, November, I could see it stretching into December. He needs to understand what his new normal is, because that injury really significantly impacts the stability and support in the knee. And I just don't know how much it's going to change. Does pure rest heal it? And if not, is this the new normal for Demko and he has to just get used to it and adjust? Either way, probably doesn't give you the warm and fuzzies if you're the Canucks, but there's no alternative to sit there and say, we got to get back in there. Hurry up. It doesn't help him, doesn't help them. And in the meantime, they're just fine.
Yeah. Rushing him would be the worst. So yeah, they have no benefit to it. Kevin Lankinen, I think, he was Woodley's breakout goalie in the last 2 years. He's nailed it in Lindgren and Connor Ingram. So if that comes to fruition, Canuck fans should be able to sleep quite well at night, not worrying about that. One last one for you, Frank, because I know you're a team that was high on them. You look at Montreal and just the amount of shots and chances they're giving up to their goaltenders, right? Like their goalies have had to stand on their heads just to keep in it. Like they're getting murdered 5-on-5. Is that remotely a concern at all for you when you look at their defense core? Do they got to go out and try to find some better defensive defensemen, or do you think that's just part of their rebuild and they're going to just live with it?
I think they've got to live with it. I think this is a team that already had too many defensemen, so injecting more into it, depending on what the long-term or short-term view of that is, I don't think you're going out anyway to try and salvage. Like, I don't think they're really pushing to try and make the playoffs this year, so you're not going to be giving up future assets to do it. In the meantime, the growing pains they're not going to be pretty, but I think in the long run, it's going to help them a lot to get that experience and to learn how to defend in the NHL. It's not easy. And they've the fact that they've had their goalies, Montembeault and to a lesser extent Primo, step up and cover up a lot of those, mask a lot of those ills, that part has been special and hugely beneficial to the Canadians. But you mentioned it. I like this Habs team. Like I think they've got some real juice, and I think they're a team that they should score a lot too, and that might help with whatever issues they have on their back end.
Frankie, enjoy the interview with Bedard. We look forward to that. Enjoy Chicago, and we will chat with you later in the week. That was episode 329 of the Rundown, brought to you by Fountain Tire. Whether you need new tires or you just need your car fixed, stop in at Fountain Tire or go online, book your appointment, fountaintire.com. Have a great week. Enjoy it. How about Tuesday? All 32 teams in action on Tuesday night. So we'll have lots to talk about on Thursday.
What's up, hockey fans? If you enjoyed that video, then you need to be hitting the subscribe button right here at Daily Faceoff. Exclusive interviews and analysis from our hockey insider Frank Saravalli, fantasy updates from Brock Sagan, and a daily live show at noon Eastern, Monday through Friday. You don't want to miss any of the fantastic content, so hit that subscribe button.